Richard Oppenlander wrote a book called Food Choice and Sustainability and Comfortably Unaware, and he basically said that everyone should eat 100% plant-based diet. There are other people that have also said that the production of pesticides creates greenhouse gases. So many other people who have spoken at this conference have strongly advocated for climate change purposes to eat 100% organic plant-based diet. Do you concur with that?
That would be very powerful. And there are many projections, and based on good evidence, that if everybody were to do that, I think as one of the speakers on a panel yesterday mentioned, it would free up so much land mass. We would have far more arable land than we need. I think it's unrealistic to think that transition could happen quickly, but I've seen projections, and they seem to be quite realistic, that even if everybody, for instance, in the United States, reduced his or her consumption of meat products by only 10%, it would be a huge change, a huge beneficial change, and it would be one that would actually create a major shift in agriculture. Even if people don't realize the power they have, just the power of the purse when they make purchases in their supermarkets or wherever they shop. If they choose to, I know many people who express concern about GMOs or whatever, and then I see what they're buying, and they're throwing things in their cart that have GMOs, pesticides. On one hand, they complain. On the other, they aren't making the simplest, most direct step in their own lives by reading labels and making intelligent choices. But the profit margins in the food industry are very, very slim. And so if there's I've read maybe even a 5% shift in the way consumers are buying certain products, that's going to have a major impact on the manufacturers. They take note of that. They have to take note of that. So it doesn't take much for people to be part of that important surge of putting your money where your mouth is, essentially, where your values are. And if everybody did that, it would be major. That alone would force a major shift in our food production, our agriculture, and then there would be a cascading effect. So yes, it would be very, very beneficial, but I think we also can run the risk of coming across turning people off, because if we're speaking to the average American or the average person in the Western industrialized world and tell them they should become a vegan, they have to become a vegan right away, they'll turn off because it's too big a change. So I would say, speaking at conferences like this, that's a message that is received well by most of the people. But there's a skill in teaching. So if you're talking to people who are not there yet and are still really wedded to eating meat and dairy products, and then be gentler about it and guide them to at least start reducing, to change. And then they'll feel better, and then they'll want to change more. Because otherwise, I think we turn off too many people, and then we lose them altogether. So that's just, and I think in the age of Donald Trump, that's certainly an approach that is important, because think of how many Americans have been badly misled by the media they listen to. So, we have to approach things in a loving, gentle way and not browbeat them, or we're going to lose them entirely.
I agree with everything Stephen just said, and would just add from a CO2 perspective that the agriculture industry emits, I think it's almost as much or even possibly a little bit more CO2 than the entire fossil fuel industry. So that's another good reason.
So let's for a second assume that the gradual approach isn't working, and there are very significant, scary stories that come out over the years, and people say, okay, we have a real problem, we really have to solve it. We just asked you if we went 100% plant-based, if we were 100% no chemicals, is carbon capture a realistic option? Is going to 100% renewable energy an option? If we composted everything, is that an option? If we all planted 10 trees a year, in other words, I understand cooperation is difficult, but if there was universal cooperation and we could do anything, what would actually work? Is there anything that if everyone was willing to do would actually work, and is carbon capture a real thing?
Carbon capture technology exists, but the amount that it would need to be scaled to have any significant mitigation with the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is, it'd have to be scaled to the millions of times, i.e. it doesn't exist yet. There is another very, very cutting edge carbon capture technology called a tree that already exists. It's very, very easy to plant them. And, there's a reason why that's been a symbol of Earth Day and environmentalism as long as it has, because if we could just leave old growth forests alone, create more wildlands, engage in the kind of farming that Stephen has talked about on a mass scale, that would have significant mitigation impacts. But it would need to be on a level that was government mandated and supported, which would be another one of those kind of pipe dream government responses to the crisis. But all the other efforts, whether it's planting trees or regenerative agriculture or recycling or reducing all of our own carbon footprint and increasing the amount of renewables used, my answer to that is always yes and. It's all of it, yes, more, and everything else that we can think of and things that we haven't even thought of yet. But it's an all hands on deck moment, and time is against us, so everything counts. And what I talked about this morning is, despite how bleak and overwhelming the overall situation is climate-wise and politically, especially in this country right now, we have a moral obligation to do all these things regardless of how bleak it looks and whether it looks as though nothing might be enough or whatever. We have a moral obligation to do all these things and more no matter what, full stop.
I remain optimistic that we can meet the challenge. Consider what happened here in the United States in meeting the challenge of World War II. The U.S. the military was very undeveloped when that conflict started. And the turnaround in the industrial capacity, just by everybody recognizing a common threat, the turnaround of American industry, the speed at which warships and airplanes began to be turned out, and it didn't take too long, was astounding. And it was the home front too. It was victory gardens. People were growing, turning their backyards into vegetable gardens. Food was rationed. There were drastic rations of meat and sugar, gasoline. So because people recognized a threat, and the collective creative intelligence was amazing. And then after the war, the Marshall Plan that helped rebuild Europe and really feed starving people, and that was major too. So there are examples of really fantastic things that might not have been able to be predicted that have been accomplished when there's a common will, because human creativity is probably the best and the most valuable and least developed natural resource we have. And that's one we all have. So I think that, again, when human creative potential is applied in the proper way, and it has to be properly motivated, then it can happen. So that's why this conference and others like it, and people like panelists here and the other speakers here, we're raising awareness in each in our own area and through what we hold dear, what we can speak about the best, and it's having an effect. And hopefully the people that hear it, I think the people listening to this, don't hold it in. Start sharing the knowledge, encouraging people to change their buying habits when it comes to food or whatever habits. Start doing a garden yourself, and there's so many urban gardens starting, which is a very encouraging development. And planting trees, and it's not just trees. I read recently that actually grasslands in many ways can be at least as good at sequestering carbon as forests. And unfortunately in Brazil, they're turning their vast savanna grasslands into soy fields too, burning them off. So we have to be aware of all of the natural treasures we have and all of the natural resources and use them wisely. And I think if we do, we should be inspired by what has been accomplished in the past and know we can do much better now because our scientific knowledge is better.
I guess the question is, what is it going to take for us to collectively decide that we need to do? We need to agree that we have to do something very big. We live in such a polarized time in terms of politics, in terms of issues. We have this idea of American entitlement that, we should be able to have exactly what we want to have. And our leaders, at least some of them, have really fostered that and assured us that everything's going to be fine. We can have our cake and eat it too. So, I get very frustrated by the, sort of one step forward, two step back thing that our government often does when an administration changes. We have, good things on the books. For example, I bought a plug-in Prius last year, and I got a $4,000 break on my federal taxes. That's pretty cool. I got a break on some, about 10 solar panels that I added to my house because the government was encouraging me to do that through a financial incentive. I'm told that the car incentives are going to be phased out. How are we going to elect the leaders we deserve to make this change across the board?